peace was shared by two individuals, one from Pakistan, another from India. These two rival countries. From India, Satyarthi Kailash, 60 years old man who is from the central part of India, who worked among the little children to liberate them from child labor from 1980 onwards, succeeded in freeing these children, 83,000 of them from 144 countries. And that is why he was awarded Nobel Prize. The second one from Pakistan, who was attempted to be killed by the Taliban a few years ago, Malala Yousafzai, 16 years old. And she practically was to be dead, but miraculously survived and came to UK for treatment, and now she is resident there. And recently she came to Ottawa to receive an honorary citizenship from Prime Minister Stephen Harper. And due to violence last week, it was cancelled. Most probably they will hold another day to honor her. And Canada has pledged $120 million for her causes. That means she would like to work among less privileged children, especially to give them chance for education, and that is the right of the children, especially the girl children in that part of the world. I try to go deeper into the lives of these two important personalities who were honored this year. I found their main struggle is for social justice. And I tried to find out what the Catholic Church is doing. Right from the beginning, from the time of John 23rd, Paul VI, and then John Paul II, Benedict XVI, and now today Pope Francis, all of them have written encyclicals and documents of the Church precisely fighting for social justice. Now if you go back to the Old Testament, today's first reading taken from Exodus chapter 22, verse 1 to 27, we find here a detailed explanation, God Himself fighting for the weak people, because He says, I am compassionate. If you ill-treat an alien, a resident in your country, you remember that you yourself were aliens in the land of Egypt for 400 years. Remember those days, God says. And then, if you ill-treat a widow, helpless orphan, they will cry to me, and then I will listen to their cry, and I will punish you. If you lend money, do not take interest. Do not exact interest from them. And if you have received or got the coat of someone as a guarantee for something that you have given, please return the coat by the end of the day, because that may be the only one garment that person must be having. And therefore, if that person cries to me, I will punish you. Difference, when we look at all these reflections from the Old Testament, we go back to the justice of God. God always stood for poor and the helpless. He was compassionate. And that's why in today's third reading we find, when that Pharisee approached Jesus with a powerful fundamental question, which is the greatest of the commandments in the law? As I told you in the introduction, the Jewish people had, apart from the 10 commandments, they had 613 important laws, one over the other, one important than the other. And as Jesus was confronting Sadducees and Pharisees in the temple, they had asked so many questions. They wanted to trap Jesus. Most probably this was an intention to trap Jesus here in the temple, asking a very important question, which is the greatest commandment? And Jesus, referring to Deuteronomy chapter 6 verse 5, love your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. Dear friends, here the whole person is involved. Just imagine, when we think of our heart, we think of giving our heart to someone, right? with all our mind and soul. What is soul? It is the gathering of all the emotions, our intellect, our will, our memory. That is the soul. That is what the mighty mystics explain to us. What is the soul? The intellect, the memory, and the will. That means with all our strength we need to love God. That is the first commandment. Now when we go back to the book of Genesis, chapter 1, verse 27, what do we find? God created man in his own image. The modern sciences will say, oh, man is a bundle of emotions and lot of things that happen due to chemical reactions. Love is chemical reaction. Anger is chemical reaction. Sexuality, chemical reaction. Can we accept that? We cannot accept it because God created us in his own image. That means we have not come into this world by chance. We have come into this world because God wanted us to be here. We have a goal to reach. And what is that goal? Jesus says, the first commandment, love your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. And the Catholic Church, in the Catechism of the Catholic Church, we add with all your strength and might. And that is the first commandment. When we go back to the commandments, dear friends, that is Exodus chapter 20, Deuteronomy chapter 5, we have all these 10 commandments listed. Exodus 10 commandments are given, and an elaboration of it we get 10 commandments explained in Deuteronomy chapter 5. Now what are these 10 commandments? Actually 4 commandments for God and 6 commandments for respecting our neighbor. But the Catholic Church has put them in together, 3 commandments for God and 7 commandments towards loving our neighbor. So it is the first commandment, you shall not have any other gods before me, you shall not take the name of God in vain, and you shall keep the Sabbath entirely for God. And loving our neighbor, love your father and mother, do not kill, do not bear false witness, do not commit adultery, do not steal, do not covet the goods of others, do not covet the woman of others. So, all these commandments in one way or the other tell us that we have a fundamental obligation to love God and love our neighbor. Now, St. John, in his first letter, you can get it at the end of the scripture, the letters of the apostles, we find St. John, first letter, chapter 4, he gives a beautiful definition for God. God is love. Chapter 4, verse 16. God is love. And that's why we have this definition that helps us to understand. And in the same letter, verse 20, St. John says, if you say that you love your God and you do not love your neighbor, your brother and sister whom you see, you are a liar. You know, very powerful words from John. If you say that you love God and you do not love your neighbor, you are a liar. Now let us reflect on the second commandment. What is this loving our neighbor? Actually, if you read this reading today in an attentive way, you will find 3 commandments, not 2. What are those 3 commandments? I am not going to ask you a question. Okay. The first commandment, love your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. The second commandment, love your neighbor. Third commandment, love yourself. You see, if you do not love yourself, you are not capable of loving your neighbor. Now, what is this loving myself? Now, just a concrete reflection on our own life. This morning, we all got up, and that's why you are here, right? Just imagine how much time you spend in your washroom, in front of the mirror, cleaning your teeth, cleaning your face, shaving, combing your hair, putting some cream, lipstick, having your breakfast, putting on nice clothing, and perhaps also good shoes, and you come out. Why? You love yourself. Now this is the autumn season and winter is very close. At night when you cover yourself, blanket yourself, how do you do that? With all care and concern for yourself. Do you leave your right leg outside and cover your whole body and said, I don't care for you. Do you do that? You pull your right leg or left leg into the blanket. Just imagine how much concern and care you have for yourself. And that's why Jesus says, love your neighbor as yourself. That is, I find, the most difficult command ever Christ has given to us. It's very easily said, oh, love your neighbor as yourself. But how much you love yourself and how much I need to love our neighbor. And now coming to still further concrete expression of this love. Catholic Church has given us many reflections or ideas. The 7 works of mercy, to be very concrete. Clothing the naked, feeding the hungry, giving drink to those who are thirsty, visiting the sick, visiting the prisoners, burying the dead, giving the shelter to those people who do not have shelter. Very concrete ideas. Now, still concretely, when we help someone who is in need, now let us imagine a homeless person comes to you, a poor person comes to you or comes to me. I have in mind, I need to help that person. He looks very miserable, very poor, he needs help. So I put in my pocket, put my hand in my pocket and give him few dollars. So now make an analysis. You can kill your charity or you can elevate your charity. You can kill your charity while giving, oh my God, I need to get rid of this man, so I give him money. Second, oh my God, after giving the money, I'll say, oh, this guy must be drinking now or taking drugs with this money. Anyway, I need to get rid of him. So what you have done, you have killed your charity. You have no merit before God, even if you have given something to the poor, because you have made your bad judgments in your mind. What is elevating your charity? Look in that particular person, Jesus himself. And that's why Jesus said, come to my kingdom, because when I was naked, you clothed me. When I was hungry, you fed me. When I was in prison, you visited me. When I was sick, you were concerned about me. And therefore, enter into your kingdom, into my kingdom. Whatever you do to the least of my brethren, you have done unto me. That is actually charity and loving our neighbor. Difference, it is very easy, as I told you in the introduction, to love someone who is good looking, who is resourceful, who has plenty of money, who is handsome, who is talented. Very easy. I will open my arms and enjoy that hug. I love that person. But to love someone whom I do not like is the fundamental charity we have to do. That is what Jesus tells us, because Jesus with all kinds of people, prostitutes, tax collectors, pagans, Romans, Samaritans, Gentiles, Greeks, all sorts of people. He did not discriminate against anyone. He wanted everyone into his company, and that is what Jesus says, love your neighbor as yourself. John the Apostle, the great apostle, friend of the Lord, when he was very old, he was 85 years old. He was in Patmos, in a cave. He was always praying. He was partially blind. He was not able to walk properly. But then, for Sunday gatherings, the disciples of John were carrying him for the Sunday Eucharist. People used to gather around him. And what was his homily? His homily was very simple. Very simple with few words. It was called 5 words homily. So he used to say, dear children, love one another. Dear children, love one another. Dear children, love one another. He used to repeat and repeat every Sunday the same sentence, the same phrase. And one day, as one of his disciples, a few of his disciples were carrying him back to his cave in Patmos, one of them asked, teacher, why do you repeat the same thing over and over again every Sunday? Just imagine if I were to repeat the same phrase every Sunday here, this church will be empty, right? Oh, this priest must be out of his mind. he is repeating the same sentence 25, 30 times. We are really fed up of his preaching and you will go to another church. But that was not the thing with John. They were listening to him, pin drop silence, with all expectation, the same expression. Dear children, love one another. And John said, my son, I heard it from my master, Jesus. The same words over and over again. Dear children, love one another. Dear friends, that is the message to all of us. Loving God and loving our neighbor. I just wind up this homily with an incident that happened in my own life. You know, when I came to Vancouver in 2009, it was in 2010, I had to go for a stewardship conference to San Diego. And we were in the airport here in Vancouver along with Archbishop Miller and many other priests and volunteers. And the immigration process, you know that. Now you have to cross into United States within the airport of Vancouver. And I was in line, and one immigration officer who was Afro-American, huge guy, come here, he said. And I went and stood in front of him with all kind of fear. And he asked me, what's your occupation? I'm a Catholic priest. Oh man, I love you already, he said. And I looked to both sides whether someone overheard that, you know. And then he said, Father, do you have a few moments? And I said, of course, yeah. And he said to me, yeah, Father, you know, long back I was very ill. I was taken to the hospital at midnight and I wanted to see a priest. I'm a Baptist, but then I wanted to see a priest. And that day the nurse told me there was only one priest available, was a Catholic priest, an old Catholic priest. And he prayed over me and he spoke to me. And I felt so comforted in my heart. Then when I got well, I decided I should visit some of the Catholic churches. So he visited some of the Catholic churches and he said to me, once I came to know what is the Catholic Church, I phoned to my mom and dad and said to them, Mom and Dad, we have all got wrong about the Catholic Church. You should come to the Catholic Church. So I brought them into the Catholic Church. Dear Father, he said, the Catholic Church is involved in such a lot of charitable works all over the world. I'm really stunned. Welcome to the United States of America. No more questions asked. Welcome to the United States of America. Dear friends, I was reflecting about this immigration officer, how he was touched by that priest. I'm not boasting about the Catholic Church, but then we know for sure all over the world such a lot of programs. Why we are inspired? Because of the words of Christ. And that's the invitation to all of us today. Loving God with all our heart, with all our soul, with all our mind, and then loving our neighbor as we love ourselves. Let us ask the Lord for this grace during this week, that we may be strengthened to become truly the great disciples of Christ himself. Kindly rise, we promise.